And then what I essentially want to jump back to you personally in your role. You essentially went from that to being the director on the second Evil Within. So how did that go about?
Well, so I was director on the DLCs as well.
Okay.
So I wrote and directed those, and then afterwards, as we were planning out what we wanted the sequel to be, then I moved into that same position for the sequel, and it was again like very tricky, because when you're making, I guess it's the scale of the game, the two things was totally different. So it was a lot of stress of figuring out, okay, how we made it work over like 3 to 6 hours, for the two DLCs, but how do we do like a full scale thing? And as what we eventually wound up doing with the sort of the more open world aspects was, especially when we tried to do it, was very was like a huge step. Like we didn't have experience making levels that big, and we kind of didn't know how to do it. And we had seen lots of games try to do these big open worlds, and try to keep the tension up, but a lot of them didn't like stick the landing. So we're like, how do we do this? And that was like a huge, kind of trial and error type thing. And a lot of the dev time was focused on just even creating that. So, even I'm trying to think, like the original area was even much bigger. I think people who play this game know that there's kind of like two big areas that you can explore, like this area and then like an area later with like a theater and some other shops and things like that. Now the original map was actually those two combined into one giant map.
Really?
And, so it was very, very big. And while that was cool, it was like you could spend like a ton of time, and everyone was like, I don't even remember what we were supposed to do. So you're like, well, I was supposed to find my daughter? Like what? Whatever. Because they would spend like hours and hours and hours and not even get any close to like what we were intending to do. So we're like, okay, there's got to be a better balance between scale of the map and then focus on what we want to do. So to kind of find a good balance between sort of that integrity of what we wanted to do with keep the story clear and push the player forward, as well as keep that element of exploration and sort of mystery. That's how we kind of separated the maps and tweaked it a lot, and then kind of found this balance, which I personally think is a very good balance. There's a lot, you can spend a lot of time exploring, but you're still very close to what you're supposed to be doing, and you don't really get too off guard of what's going on.
And that must have been a huge task, midway development, to essentially go from this big open world, or a bigger map and a bigger world, to something that's a bit more split. Like, how challenging was that to try and change up that? Because it doesn't just affect the map, it might affect the story, it might affect any other points of the game. So how did that go about when you had to make such a big decision midway?
That was actually much easier, because it was hard for us to figure out how do we balance the story with the map this big, but when it slimmed down, it was easier for us to sort of place the things that we wanted to do. And so actually that helped out a lot. So
that's cool.
It was like a positive thing. So I know probably there's some people who have been like, it would have been great to explore that map, but like from the experience of the developers who played that version, it actually was not well received, because we found it just kind of it got hazy of what you're supposed to do, and actually it got even a little bit boring because you drifted so far away from like the points that you're supposed to do. So I think what we wound up shipping was actually the best version of what we tried to do. So there's no regrets there that we couldn't get that working. It was actually a positive that it,
for sure,
that we made that and tried to work.
Well, speaking of regrets, do you have any regrets with the second Evil Within 2? And I know that might be a tough question, but feel free to avoid it, John.
No. My biggest regret is we couldn't let you pet the cat in the safe room. No joke. We wanted to actually add that in like as like a TLC thing, just as like a little patch in. But it was actually kind of like, there was some like code thing that actually made it very difficult because it interacted with the the projector and everything like that. And there it was causing too many issues, and we got too many red flags about that. So I was like, oh my god, I should have did it earlier, because I was so particular about like the cat movements and things like that. Like, some people don't see it, but there's like a rare instance where when you sit at the projector, the cat jumps off to get out of your way. But I'm like, there has to be at least one time where like the cat doesn't jump off, so it blocks the projector, and then Sebastian's like, hey, get out of the way, I want to look at the projector.
I hope you recognize that the chat right now, John, is just like, I want to be able to pet the cat. Just add that back in, and we'll be fine. Because
anything we make up from now on will always. I've learned my lesson. We'll always include petting pets or something like that, or appreciating the pet's existence, because the cat appeared in the DLC, and it was supposed to be like this. The save points for the DLC were these couches, and the cat was there. And Kidman, when she would sit on the couch, she would pet the cat. And so there was that kind of like connection to it. But it was kind of funny because we always assumed that Sebastian was not the character who would have a cat or have a pet. So he would kind of be a little bit uncomfortable with the character. So actually, people who cleared the game in the classic mode, the ending kind of photograph is, it shows Sebastian and Lily have gotten a cat, and clearly it's like attacking Sebastian, and he's not he's not good with that. So that was kind of a little bit of a character trait, but it would have been funny to have him kind of attempt to get closer to that cat over the course of.
Oh, for sure, that would have been lovely. I mean, like, look, speaking of Sebastian specifically, though, I'd love to ask about what you wanted to do with him, moving from the first Evil Within to the second one, Evil Within. Him as a character. How did you want him to be as the protagonist, and the things that you wanted to change? I'd love to go into that.
Yeah, so in the first game, he was kind of like almost like a non-character. He was kind of like a blank slate. And that was I think the intention of the writers of the first game. They kind of wanted just it to be a way for the player to experience things.
Yeah.
But I think it's just my style, that I think the main character has to be a little bit more human for you to relate to them. And so something I kind of pushed with the DLC stuff, I tried to have, for example, the story of Kidman it's like a personal journey and she gets involved in this horror things, but it's always kind of comes back to the story that she's trying to do. And in our discussions with the writers of this game, I was like, there's obviously this personal aspect of Sebastian looking for his daughter, which again, he could be a blank slate and just be like a dad looking for his daughter. But he's kind of going through the same things of the first game, and I was like, there has to be like a personal journey of he needs to sort of grow throughout this experience. It's not just I found my daughter and that's it. And so I really wanted to include, and actually we kind of wanted to push it a little bit further, but it was a little bit tricky to get all the stuff in. But the second half of the game, when you after you defeat Stefano and you fight Theodore, I was like, the whole story gets even more personal, because you find out stories about Sebastian's wife and everything like that.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I found the most interesting was the sort of was Sebastian dealing with the trauma of the first game. A lot of games just have the characters go like, yeah, I was there, and,
right.
And they kind of just brush it off like, yeah, it was tough, but I did it. And but for anyone who played the first game, it's like there's no one who can go through that sort of sequence of events and kind of just remain unscathed by that. So we wanted to have these kind of like personal moments, and it was a little bit tricky because it got kind of complicated. That it's not a regret per se, but I think we probably could have done it a little bit, maybe like less, maybe tongue in cheek is the nice way to say it. But I love the thing that we did at the end of the game, where he really figures out a way to get over his sort of the trauma that he's been dealing with, which is like a combination of the horrible things he's seen in the game of the first game, as well as his kind of the lack of his ability to be kind of like a true father and save his daughter and just be sort of help his family.
Yeah.
And he comes face to face literally with his fears in the form of like the bosses of the original game, because that's what Theodore does, just has to put it in his face. And he literally like turns the tables. He takes the weapons away from them, and I was really happy we were able to incorporate that. It wasn't just a cutscene; it was actually in a gameplay oriented way of him getting stronger and overcoming that. But even when he gets over that, there's still that aspect of like, so that's the trauma of the first game, and then you have the trauma of his family, and that's like the hardest thing for him. So even to the very end, it's something that he kind of even in the ending, he kind of doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to face reality in that aspect, but he does decide to, realize that he can't have everything, and he has to, if he wants a good life for his daughter, he has to sort of sacrifice another thing that's very important to him, which would be, his family as a whole, which would be his wife even. So, I definitely wanted that element in there. And I think it resonated a lot. We were looking at the responses of even the Japanese fans and the English fans, and surprisingly, it resonated a lot more with Japanese fans. We got a lot of the comments there, and I know Mikami-san, when he was when he saw it, he was like, he said the equivalent of like, this is a new genre of survival horror. It's crying horror, because like you could like some people might actually sort of like feel emotional at the ending of the game because of the kind of the human aspect of it. So he thought that was very original, and we kind of did see that with some of the fans. So I'm glad to see that people appreciated that.
Yeah, well, you mentioned an interesting point about the Japanese fans resonated a little bit more than maybe the Western audience. Like how difficult is that to try and, because obviously as a developer, you're trying to incorporate feedback of fans as much as possible and listen to what they're saying. How difficult was it, and how varied were the views when you look at Japanese fans and maybe fans in the US or any other parts of the world?
Yeah, well, it was tricky from a development standpoint, because we're a Japanese studio. It's almost completely Japanese devs, and in a weird way, like I was on like the Japanese side. I know.
Yeah.
I saw comments come out this. It's like, oh, they put like a foreign guy in charge of this game to make it accessible to U.S. audiences. But in a weird way, I was almost I was playing to the more the less obvious things that were in the game. I think I've always been a fan of the Japanese survival horror games, so I was kind of trying to push it in that direction. But I thought the themes that were in this were kind of universal, so I wasn't too afraid of sort of isolating any fans or making or they wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
I think the setting itself was obviously we went for a very sort of American type setting, but I don't think that was because we wanted it to feel more American or anything like that. It just kind of fit with the type of game that we're doing. The original game had more of like a European setting, so it's just kind of we went with what felt natural to it. I guess we never really made any decision to like, this is for the Japanese fans, this is for the American fans. It's just kind of what felt right for the game.